All right, let's get into it. Today we are unpacking a seriously ambitious idea, Crippin's theory and the Atlas Codex. And the core claim is pretty wild. It suggests that balance isn't just, a feeling we have. It's a universal, measurable constant that literally shapes everything, from the way galaxies form to our own mental stability. The whole thing really boils down to this one question. It's asking us to imagine harmony not as some vague, abstract goal, but as a fundamental law of nature, something as real and quantifiable as gravity. So, to get our heads around this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the core idea of a formula for balance. Then, we'll decode its central equation. After that, we'll see how it supposedly applies to the cosmos and our own minds, check out how it shows up in architecture, and finally, explore what its vision for the future looks like. Okay, section 1. Let's start with the biggest, most provocative claim of the whole theory. Balance isn't about being still. It's a rhythm, a pulse that you can actually measure and even design things with. And right away, this flips our whole idea of balance on its head. We tend to think of it as perfect stillness, right? But this theory says no, that's not it. It redefines balance as this active, dynamic process they call reciprocity, a constant, rhythmic give and take that creates a stable, coherent state, not a frozen one. So, if balance is a rhythm, how in the world do you measure it? Well, that brings us right to the mathematical heart of this entire framework, something called the T equation. And here it is, the ATLS2 equation. It looks simple enough. T equals P times kappa times R. In this formula, T stands for the constant of balance, and it's the product of three really important variables. P for proportion, kappa, that's the Greek letter kappa, for phase, and R for resonance. Okay, I know that sounds super abstract, so let's bring it down to earth with a marathon analogy. Think of P, proportion, as your body's optimal design for running, your ideal stride length, your form. It's the fundamental structure. Then you've got K, phase. That's your timing, your rhythm, the perfect pace that lets you keep going without gassing out. And finally, there's R, resonance. That's your sustained energy, the coherence that keeps your whole system working together smoothly. When you get all three of those just right, proportion, phase, and resonance, you hit T, a state of perfect, sustainable balance. Now, this is where things get really wild. The theory claims that this exact same formula, proportion, phase, and resonance, doesn't just apply to running a race. It applies everywhere, from the vast physics of the cosmos all the way down to the inner geometry of our own thoughts. So how does that work on a universal scale? The theory proposes this idea of equal force symmetry. It imagines two opposing forces. You have the reality field, which is basically everything we can see and measure pushing outward, and then you have a containing field, this unseen potential that pulls inward, giving everything its shape and structure. The claim is that true stability, that T state, only happens when these two forces are in perfect tension, equal in power but pulling in opposite directions. And believe it or not, the theory applies that same push and pull idea directly to our minds. It argues that our consciousness has this toolkit of 4 basic geometric shapes it uses to make sense of the world. The triangle gives us clarity and focus. The circle is all about connection and empathy. The square provides stability and structure. And the spiral represents growth and learning. These are supposedly the fundamental building blocks of how we think and feel. So why are we talking about shapes in our head? Well, the theory claims that if we consciously use these mental shapes, we can create more inner harmony. The ultimate goal is to get 2 key parts of our brain working together better. The default mode network, which is kind of like your daydreaming, wandering mind, and the task positive network, your focused, get-it-done mind. When those 2 are in sync, you get that balanced T state internally. Okay, so we've gone from the cosmos to our own minds. Now let's get physical. Let's see how all this abstract stuff shows up in the tangible world of design and architecture. Where can we actually see this formula at work? The theory points to 3 classic architectural forms that it says are basically physical models of the T equation. Think about it. The pyramid, with its perfect, stable geometry, is the ultimate expression of proportion. The ziggurat, with its repeating steps, embodies phase. It's a journey marked by a clear rhythm. And the dome, famous for how it contains and amplifies sound, is the perfect symbol of resonance. And this idea of stabilizing geometry isn't just something humans came up with. We see it all over nature. You know the Fibonacci sequence, that spiral pattern in seashells and sunflowers? The theory says this pattern creates what it calls the Fibonacci seal, which is basically nature's blueprint for stable, harmonious growth. Now, hold on to that thought about the Fibonacci spiral, because this is where the theory makes its most mind-bending connection. What on earth could a pattern from a sunflower have in common with, of all things, radio engineering? The answer is something called the Smith chart. It's a tool that radio engineers have used for decades to stabilize the flow of energy in things like transmission lines, and the claim here is absolutely stunning. The underlying geometry of the Smith chart, which creates resonance in electronics, is basically identical to the Fibonacci seal, which creates resonance in living systems. It's the same math, the same geometry for achieving balance and minimizing energy loss, just applied to totally different things. So, after all that, what's the point? Where do we go from here? This brings us to our last section, the theory's vision for how we can use these ideas to build a better future. It all culminates in a blueprint for what's called a living ratio city. The whole idea is to stop obsessing over endless expansion and start focusing on attunement. This means designing cities using natural patterns like the Fibonacci sequence, building with the environment instead of just on top of it, and following one very strict rule. For every single built surface, an equal living surface must exist. The entire philosophy really boils down to this one powerful idea. It's a call to shift what we value, moving away from just building for sheer power and scale, and moving toward building for harmony, balance, and proportion. And finally, to bring this huge cosmic idea all the way back to us as individuals, the theory leaves us with this beautiful, striking image. It suggests the human heart is like a key node in this whole system, that its electromagnetic field is the ultimate tuning mechanism, allowing us to sync up our own personal rhythm with the geometry of the planet itself. So, we end right back where we started, with a question for you. If there's any truth to this, then our own lives are also a search for that balance. So think about it. What geometric pattern, the focused triangle, the stable square, the connected circle, or the growing spiral, defines that most resonant, most balanced rhythm in your own life? It might just be worth looking for.